Hello everybody and welcome back to another edition of KerVAM, a Doctor Who podcast where generally we talk about all things DVDs, Blu-rays, special features, documentaries, all about Doctor Who. And well, we're not specifically doing that today because of course there was a brand new episode of Doctor Who to enjoy, The Power of the Doctor. So we're going to be chatting all about that. We're going to be chatting about the new logo that's being released for RTD2, the prospect of a Disney collaboration as well with Doctor Who, that will see hopefully some exciting changes for the future, I think, but at least a distribution deal as well. So, of course, I'm joined as always by my three trusty companions, Bill, Ryan and Charlie. Charlie, you've been here and there the last few episodes, but it's great to have you back this time. And I'm really looking forward to chatting all about the Power of the Doctor. So what did it live up to expectations or down to expectations for you?
I'd say it exceeded my expectations. Okay. Not in the sense that it was a masterpiece and it was fantastic, because it wasn't. But honestly, I expected it to be a really convoluted, really pretty bad mess. And it was definitely make much sense. It could have scrapped a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, I still feel it was a load of fun, had a lot more like cameos and like big shock twist moments that really caught me off guard. And I really think Chibnall kind of ended the era on something resembling a high, which I think is quite good, because the era itself has been kind of patchy, well, just a little bit. And it's good that we aren't left with too bad of a taste in our mouths after the episode we had on Sunday. And I think I know lots of people, well, there are certain circles of people complaining about the number of cameos and stuff in the episode, but personally I thought that absolutely elevated it. And I feel my main criticism with lots of the era is that it doesn't really feel too much like Doctor Who. And I feel this episode, it's especially absolutely flipped it on its head, and just it's felt the most Doctor Who-ish that it has really since the end of the Capaldi era. And that's not even mentioning, David Tennant, the trailer we got at the end, all of that stuff. So yeah, I think it's not a great episode. It's not heaven sent. It's not The Doctor Falls, but it doesn't need to be.
I think that's a very succinct way of putting it, really. Yeah, I strongly agree. Well, Bill, we'll come to you next. Thank you for joining us once again. And yeah, where did you sit on the Power of the Doctor? Was it what you hoped it would be?
Well, going into it, as I'm sure we've discussed multiple times previously, I was kind of very cautious and unsure about it, because I wasn't too sure really whether Chris Chibnall could actually pull it off. I think, to be honest, for the most part, I think he actually did, which is like, I'm very happy about. I'm very pleasantly surprised about, because not anything against Chris Chibnall. It's just that, just given how much stuff was going on in this episode, the fact that I came away feeling like, I mean, I still have some issues of it, but I feel like for the most part, it handled most stuff pretty well. And especially when it came to the cameos, like the old Doctors coming back, they were all written extremely well. And the way they came back made sense in terms of the wider plot. And it wasn't just fan service for the sake of fan service. It was like, there was a reason why they came back, and it made sense in the context of the episode. And then obviously you had Tegan and Ace, and then some other older companions. You had Ian Chesterton. I mean, that was so lovely to see him back. You had Joe, you had Mel, and it was just really lovely. And Graham, of course. Although we already knew he was coming back, but
still nice.
I think it's kind of a weird special, I think, because obviously straight after this episode, like next year, we're going to be getting the actual 60th anniversary specials, the 3 specials. But I think if, say, Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker had stayed another year, I think this is probably how Chibnall would have tackled the 60th, essentially, because it's kind of in that kind of anniversary kind of vibe. I know it's celebrating BBC centenary, but for the show itself, it's not quite such a big anniversary yet, and yet it still feels like one, which I really liked, and it just made it even more of a very special episode.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the best ways to put it is, yeah, this is probably Chibnall's 60th anniversary, essentially. Just did it a year early, and well, I don't know how much that's affected at what RTD's done next year, but it'll be interesting to find out. And so, Ryan, we come to you. You obviously have had pretty low expectations going into this, would you say? You know, we've talked since, well, I guess pretty much for the last year or so, since Flux was happening, we talked about what you were expecting of the Centenary special and what you thought it might be and how you might feel about it. So, having finally seen it, how does that stack up with your expectations?
Well, I did say a year ago that I didn't think I was going to love it, and I didn't completely love it. I don't think it's a masterpiece by any stretch, but surprisingly, I actually really enjoyed it. Now, granted, it does in some way highlight Chibnall's fault as a showrunner, because there's this lot of stuff that he does you expect will be brought up, but they don't, like properly wrapping up the Timeless Child and the mystery of the fugitive doctor and all those different and there were some sections of Flux, like, was the universe actually restored or was it damaged? Who knows? And everything to do with the division, like what was the division before Flux? And you know, everything you think you would expect to be brought up didn't get brought up, and in a way it highlights just kind of how, in the end, how pointless all of that was. Like the whole Timeless Child, it kind of ended up meaning nothing by the end, and it left wondering, well, if it wasn't going to get resolved, why did they bother doing it in the first place? So that is very frustrating. But if they did try and do that, I think we would have had another Time of the Doctor situation on our hands where they tried to wrap up, do too many things in one short story, and it ends up being a confused, jumbled mess. Because I think that was the problem with Matt Smith's last episode, was that they tried to do so much in 1 hour, like wrapping up every loose thread of his run and trying to be a regeneration story and all this different stuff, and it just ended up not working. And I feel like, in a way, Chibnall must have known of that, and so he decided to instead just do like a one-off kind of story that was in some ways own 60th level. And honestly, given the options, I think this was the better choice, because it's definitely the more entertaining choice, the much more, I think, the much more cohesive choice. And in that front, I actually kind of prefer this over Time of the Doctor, to be honest, because where Time of the Doctor had some higher highs, that story also had much, much lower lows for me. So in a way, I feel like this is more consistent. I mean, in a way, I would put this on the same level as The End of Time, to be honest. Like, in a way, this kind of reminded me a lot of The End of Time, in that they're both chaotic messes, but at least they're glorious chaotic messes. And frankly, I wouldn't have had it any other way. So yeah, it does have some problems. And in the end, I didn't completely love it. But in the end, that didn't really matter, to be honest.
I think you sum it up pretty well, that it really was, for many fans, I think, something just quite a bit better than we thought it was going to be. Like, that's the bottom line. We all kind of went in expecting the worst. And in reality, we got a really good episode of Doctor Who that, yes, it has its flaws. And yes, it is full of fan service. But we're all massive Doctor Who fans, so when they're quoting the Dalek Master Plan or, you know, talking about survival or stuff, like, we just love it. Like, it's just great fun. And, you know, with an episode like this, I feel like it's kind of your license to do that for an episode, because it's essentially the anniversary, as we say, an anniversary special. So bring back Doctors, bring back companions, throw in loads of references. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you know, as you said, Ryan, I think quite interestingly, that actually this story probably worked a lot better, because it is, as much as it's full of references, it is actually a very standalone story. Like, it's not that the whole plot, it doesn't really link back to anything from the era so far. It's just kind of the Masters internalized bonkers plot that doesn't really make any sense, but it doesn't really matter because I feel like whereas Stephen Moffat tried to give like the Master really complex sort of motivations with Missy and, you know, go into loads of depth with that, kind of Chibnall's just sort of gone, well, I remember the Master from the 80s. Anthony Ainley just did bonkers things every week that made absolutely no sense, but it was quite fun, wasn't it? So I'm just going to do that with the Master again.
Yeah, and it sure resulted in probably, I'm sure we're going to get this to this later on, but it did result in probably one of the top 5 most bizarre WTF moments in Doctor Who history that legit made my jaw drop, which rarely happens, but it did. Well, we'll get into that much later. Yes. I'm sure we will.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I just think that's really, really interesting. That Chibnall has a different approach, but actually in this episode, it was really effective and, you know, made an episode that felt like it was going at 100 miles an hour the whole way through. Like right from the start, it felt like, we're racing through this. But there was always something kind of interesting enough to keep your attention. And I guess at points it maybe, you know, you kind of lost where you were a little bit, but I felt like it was always reasonably cohesive. Obviously alongside loads of eye candy of classic Doctors and companions and whatever that just kind of, you know, is like, oh yeah, another one, way, so happy, which is always fun. So I don't know, Charlie, what the sort of the story in general, like the whole, you know, Dalek, Cybermen, Master plot that kind of quite nicely intertwined, I thought, kind of, did you feel like that really worked to kind of shape the whole story?
Well, as a short answer, no. It was very confusing. It was very hard to follow. On the first watch, I didn't really care because I was just like as you said, classic Doctors, classic companions references. The Master was great, and he was wearing, you know, all the past Doctors' clothes and stuff. It was fantastic. And on a second watch, I paid very close attention, and I pretty much understand the plot, but it's on the first watch, it's really hard to follow. Like the Master stealing this Quarunx thing to power a planet to force regenerate the Doctor, and the Daleks are here as well. And like, it's very, very convoluted and confusing.
Yes.
Which I kind of expected from the plot. So I'm not overly disappointed because at the same time it was loads of fun. But yeah, that was like its main flaw in the sense that it was very packed full of stuff. There was a whole unit invasion thing, which I think could have been cut quite a bit because it got very tedious, and we just got like a 3-minute scene every 20 minutes. And it was, I wasn't a big fan of that. I think if you removed everything to do with the Daleks, it would have worked a lot smoother, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, the whole thing with the betraying is a lot better in other stories, I think. So if you remove everything to do with the Daleks, I think it would have been a lot more, you know, nice and smooth and streamlined. But of course, you know, it's an anniversary special in every sense except the literal one, so you've got to have a Dalek.
Yeah, it's true. I think, as you say, like I'd kind of almost forgotten about that. The sort of betraying Dalek thing is just pretty pointless. It's basically just a ploy to get the Doctor to come to the planet, I suppose. But like, it feels a bit like, why even bother? And as you say, the unit stuff is probably the main thing in this. Unfortunately, the main stuff that does feel a little bit tedious, a little bit like, as great as it is to see Ace and Tegan, also I didn't feel like that invested in that sort of plot line, and I was kind of like, okay, let's get back to the, you know, the Doctor and the Master and all that kind of stuff that felt like the most interesting and engaging aspect to the story. I felt like, I don't know, Bill, did you find the plot as difficult to understand as well?
I've only watched it once, so I can't say for certain yet whether I've fully understood it. Okay. I think, again, I'd have to say, I didn't fully understand it, but in a way, I didn't mind so much because I was having such a fun time of the special in general, that I didn't mind so much that the Master's plan, from what I was able to make out, made literally no sense. I think it's literally a classic example of Chibnall saying, right, I want to do a story in this location, but I also want to do it in this location and then in another location, like I did in Praxius, I remember, is a classic, another good example of it. And I feel like whenever the Chip tried to do that, it just hasn't really worked quite as well as I think the writers have hoped, especially Chibnall. And in this instance, it didn't quite make sense why the master was stealing paintings, stealing seismologists, and then was trying to make the Doctor force regenerate into him, and how that was all supposed to connect together. And then you got the Daleks and Sidemen doing stuff as well. And just saying it out loud now, it sounds very convoluted. So but I think like I said, it's still like you can have fun with the special overall. So it's not like you're kind of scratching your head that much that you're not able to enjoy the special at all. It's just that it is a completely bonkers plot, which doesn't really kind of go anywhere such, but is still kind of enjoyable. I don't know. It's weird. It is very strange. Like, again, I would never understand Chris Chibnall's obsession with having things in different places around the world. I think that's very strange.
The captions and deaths, which honestly
all the captions, of course, classic Chris.
Yep.
Yeah, they did give me a little bit of a PTSD flashback to Flux, because Flux had a overloaded with captions and dates. And
was it like Survivors of the Flux? I think had about 12 of those in it or something, didn't it?
One of the many reasons why that storyline just did not work at all. So, I don't think it was overused too much in this. I mean, it wasn't quite a lot, but not to the degree of I think Flux did it.
Yeah, exactly. I think they Chris managed to rein in a little bit compared to him going wild with the names and the locations in Flux that just got a bit bonkers. But Ryan, for you, the plot, was it something that worked? Did it come to a satisfying conclusion? I don't know. Where do you sit on the actual sort of fundamental story behind this episode?
I mean, in a way, it's kind of, as it does sort of remind me a bit of The End of Time, a little bit in that, and also to a certain extent, Logopolis a little bit, because the Master's plan in both those other two stories didn't really make that much sense either. Like, in The End of Time, he just wants to make everyone like him just so he can have an army to conquer the universe. That's a bit bizarre and basic and a bit like, why would the Master even go to that extreme? And then especially with Logopolis, it's very unclear about what it is the Master really wants to do in that story. So it was kind of like that. And I still love Logopolis despite that. So, and in a way, it was a little bit similar to this, where, yes, the Master Plan was convoluted, but in a way, I can sort of move past that because I've been used to this so much in the past that it didn't really bother me. And in a way, I kind of like the idea of he wants to take over the Doctor because in some way he wants to be like the Doctor, because throughout watching Sacha Dhawan's run as the Master, you can see there's a little bit of self-loathing in himself, that he kind of hates himself, even because in The Timeless Children, as much as I really didn't like that story, I do like that one little bit where he was just like, that little death particle didn't go off or explode. I actually would have been fine with that. And so he kind of, a little bit of, again, self-loathing. And when so that's why he wants to be the Doctor, because the Doctor gets all the best stuff. Why not me? And so, and then at the end, when he's having to go back, he's like, please don't make me go back to being me. And I do quite like, there's a little bit of that, that little bit of a sadness, tragedy to his Master, despite the fact that he is so ludicrous. I do like the fact that they've given him a little bit more depth. And in a way, he does it I think he does it better than John Sim did in his earlier appearances. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore John Sim.
Mm-hmm.
Later on in Peter Capaldi's ending with World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls, I feel like John Sim was perfect in that story. He delivered a great performance, but in his appearances with Tennant, it did seem like the sort of over-the-topness didn't quite work with him. I feel like it bordered on cartoonish at times. So and I feel like Sacha Dhawan actually provides a perfect balance of that ridiculousness. But I think he plays in the sense that he's sort of a bit like a sad brat in a way, and so I feel like he did such a great job of that. Yes, some of it is a bit ridiculous. Like, why did he bother disguising himself as Rasputin and hiding in Russia? Like, what was the point of that? But then again, I think I know why.
It was just for the music, just for the musical moment. That's all it was.
We'll get onto that moment again, biggest WTF moment. But again, I'm sure we're going to get onto that later on.
But you have just touched on something actually I think really interesting about the Master, which I hadn't thought about until now. Is like, as much as his plan in this episode is bonkers, actually with the context of the Timeless Children, it does kind of make sense what his ultimate goal is. Because his goal of this is to become the Doctor, essentially. And that's off the back of the Timeless Children, where he's discovered and shown the Doctor that she's suddenly really special and important, and he's really unhappy about the fact that she's like, you know, the most important Time Lord because she's the Timeless Child and all of that. And so I sort of see that off the back of him, you know, discovering that and then getting defeated by her, naturally, like, he would see the only way to kind of come back at her and, you know, to become what he wants to be, because he wants to be the ultimate sort of Time Lord, I suppose, would be to become the Doctor, quite literally. So I guess maybe that, you know, because this is his first plan as far as we know. After the Timeless Children, he's jumped straight to this with all the Cybermasters that are still a bit ridiculous, but there we are. And I
do think they looked a bit much better in this than they did in the Timeless Children. I noticed they did redesign them quite heavily. I think they do. Yes, they do look a little bit silly, but not quite to the same degree as they did in the Timeless Children.
Exactly.
I do agree with what you said. That I feel like they did a good job of doing this Doctor Master dynamic. I think that's one of the shining points of Jodie Whittaker's run, is that they had a good strong Doctor Master dynamic. Not quite as strong as, say, Delgado and Pertwee or Capaldi and Gomez, but it's still a good solid dynamic, I thought. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that Sacha Dhawan has just been such a great master as well. Like, I feel like he was one of the highlights of this episode, just in his the performance, being able to take on all the different sort of disguises and slightly different takes on the character, then playing the Doctor. Just the energy he brings to it and the character he has, I think, is just it's so much fun, if nothing else. I think, really, like, it's just entertaining to watch him play the Master in this way. That, and as you say, he also has that really great chemistry with Jodie and that great relationship between the Doctor and the Master that I think is so effective. Well, guys, let's talk about that WTF moment, as you said, Ryan. A moment which I feel like it was kind of Chris going full like RTD, basically, and just doing something crazy. Did you like or dislike this scene, Ryan?
I never thought that Chibnall would have topped that Sontaran chocolate moment from End of Flux, but somehow he did with this. It's as soon as that song came on, I was just like, oh my God, they're actually doing this. And then it went on and as it went on, my mouth just dropped and I literally shouted, "What?" at the top of my voice when that happened. And then to crown it all off, as the Master's boogieing around, you have a Cyberman and a Dalek just looking at each other in the music like, what is the hell is he doing? And apparently that was unscripted. That was improvised on the day, apparently, which is pretty surprising. Honestly, I don't know what kind of paint thinner Chibnall sniffed when he thought of that scene, but afterwards, I just laughed for a straight minute afterwards, and it was pure laughter. And you know how they say like laughter's the best medicine?
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna live till I'm like 290. I think it added a good few extra 100 years to my life.
Yeah.
It was so insane and ridiculous. In a way, it's kind of like one of those bizarre moments from late 70s Doctor Who, like the Erasmus teaching the paint, and and it's kind of up there with that, where it's like, yes, it's ridiculous and it's stupid, and I should not like it, but yet in some weird, bizarre way, I kind of loved it. It was so weird. I mean, oh my god, that's going to be imprinted in my memory.
It's certainly iconic. I personally enjoyed it. I know it was ridiculous, but I found it fun and enjoyed it. And I just thought, I'm just going to embrace this and enjoy this moment as much as it was ridiculous. So I don't know. That's right. What, Charlie, where do you stand on it?
I kind of liked it. I don't think it detracted from the episode, and it just sort of encapsulates what the whole thing was, really, just ridiculous, bonkers fun.
Exactly.
I mean, there was so much stuff going on that I didn't entirely remember it. By the time the episode was out, it was like
I know what you mean.
sixth on my list of crazy moments. But it was certainly it was very to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. And Bill, do you sit on the right side of it?
Yeah, I am sorry to have to say this, but I really, really loved it first time I saw it.
Yeah.
I just thought, it is such a bonkers thing to do, but I just thought it is actually quite somewhat in character for the Master to some extent, at least this Master, and even more so Chibnall's writing, because Chris Chibnall likes to put in bizarre moments like that in his writing. I remember, like Ryan said, that Sontarwan with the chocolate in The Vanquishers, I guess we'll have to have a conversation in Resolution, stuff like that. Bits of like, wow, I get that that's kind of his sense of humor, and obviously with humor it's all subjective, so you're either going to find it funny or not, basically. But I think it really worked just because it was just so absurd. You couldn't help but just find it so funny and so amusing.
Yeah, it's going to spawn 1,000 internet memes for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, that covers off that moment. So I feel like the next big thing we have to talk about is the moment where we saw 4.5 classic Doctors in the space of a minute, which I know it had been rumoured-ish for a while, but I still didn't quite believe it was going to actually happen. I was like, especially when we saw the Master regenerate into the Doctor and then come out wearing a costume that had all the different Doctors sort of in the costume, I thought, well, that's where they got the idea from. It's just, they've seen a picture or somebody's heard about a different costumes, and actually it was just that. But we saw a load of Doctors, and we saw Paul McGann on screen again, and all of this. I mean, Bill, wasn't it just great? Wasn't it just brilliant?
It really was. I mean, it was so magical to see them all again. And I just loved how they were tackled in this special, because it was just like the scenes between the Fifth Doctor and Tegan and Seventh Doctor and Ace, they were handled so well, because they just were so like, where, like Tegan starts off that scene starts off the whole episode being really annoyed with the Doctor for leaving her, basically, for kind of supposedly forgetting all about her. Yeah. And then the Fifth Doctor then later says to her, "No, I never forget any of you." And, and then they talk about Adric and how the Sidemen reminds Tegan of Adric's death and everything. And I just thought that was such a wonderful kind of little moment between the two of them. And with Doctor and Ace, just them kind of coming to terms with each other, and Ace kind of saying, "Yeah, actually, I forgive you, Professor," basically, and I see what you're trying to do, and and then the Seventh Doctor finishes it by saying, we're both Ace, and it's just a lovely moment.
Such a heartwarming moment.
It really was. And then just in general, just like I say, just seeing them in that. I think it was based in the Doctor's subconscious, wasn't it?
Yes.
Or the other ones. That worked really well. I mean, that's kind of an idea that I've always kind of thought as well, like what happens when each of the previous Doctors like regenerates to the next one, do they go into subconscious? And so it's nice that Chibnall basically did that, and kind of like had them in particular as the Guardians of the Edge, I think they called themselves, which was really nice. It's a very different but a really unique way of kind of getting the old Doctors into it without just doing the same old multi-Doctor story. Because technically it is a multi-Doctor story.
It's just a few in there,
there's loads altogether. But I mean, it does it in such a different way that I just think it's so refreshing to have that. And so it's not just them running up and down corridors, and bickering with each other all the time. It's actually them having some really heartfelt moments with some of their former companions, and then helping to inspire Jodie's Doctor to keep on fighting against the Master. It was really nice.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I fully share all of that. It just was such a joyous moment. Seeing all those again. I mean, Charlie, did you enjoy that moment? Was it surprising for starters? Did you have any inkling that was actually going to happen?
I did not go in expecting classic Doctors to appear. I thought it's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen, but it'd be cool if it did. And while I don't think it was my favorite moment of the episode, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that later. But it was the one where my inner Whovian was just the absolute happiest, especially since I feel classic Who doesn't get the acknowledgement that it deserves in New Who quite a lot. Like, I thought Day of the Doctor, it was great, but at the end of the day, it didn't really feel like it was celebrating all of Doctor Who, and I feel this encapsulated that a lot better in that sense. It's not better Day of the Doctor, but I feel in that respect it kind of is. When the scene first started, we just got a sort of overhead shot of Jodie Whittaker Doctor standing next to a white-haired figure who was sitting down, and I was like, oh no, it's Tecteun. We've got a timeless
that's literally what I thought. That's exactly what I thought
it
was going to be.
Yeah. Thought the episode was ruined. I was like, oh no, that he's done it, and we're going to see the house and everything. And as soon as it cut to David Bradley, I was like, yes. And then obviously we got Colin Baker, then we got Peter Davis, and then we got Paul McGann. I was thinking, oh, it's a shame we'll get no Sylvester McCoy, and then Sylvester McCoy appeared, and it was. I think the biggest surprise was Paul McGann. I think it was like, I did not expect Paul McGann to appear. I thought 5, 6, 7 would be like the trio of them. But we got the first Doctor, David Bradley. I think lots of people don't really like his incarnation in Twice Upon a Time, and I understand why, given how Moffat handled him. But I really enjoy his incarnation of the Doctor, like, for what it is. I think he does a good job. And then obviously, Paul McGann was like the highlight of seeing past Doctors. He had like 3 lines, and he was just fantastic.
I know. They all owned the screen really in that moment, didn't they? And just seeing them all back again after so many years, because it's the first time we've really properly seen them all on screen in such a long time. I know, like, Peter Davison did Time Crash a few years ago, and Paul did Night of the Doctor, but to see them in an actual episode of Doctor Who, in, as you say, kind of the anniversary special of the whole show, rather than the anniversary special of New Who that was Day of the Doctor to a large extent, was just brilliant. Ryan, are you in the same boat? One of the highlights of the episode?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I kind of had a suspicion that there were going to be some past Doctors that were going to be showing up in the latter half of the episode to some extent, but how it was I was more curious how they could have handled it, and I thought they handled it really well. I mean, just seeing, the first Doctor is, for me, he is still the first Doctor, the original to me, and always will be, and I can understand some of the writing for him in Twice Upon a Time was maybe a little bit iffy at times, but what worked with him in that story really worked, I will say. And I thought David Bradley did such a great job with him. I mean, as I said, when he was great in Twice Upon a Time, he was really good and provided a good counterpoint to what Peter Capaldi was going through in that story. And I thought he just captured the essence of William Hartnell so beautifully. And then, of course, we have, again, Paul McGann, who is probably my I would say maybe my fifth or sixth favorite Doctor, Paul McGann. Just seen him again, and him being like, and him having his own traditional attitude. He's like, I don't do robes myself, and Sylvester, of course, like, there's always one.
Yeah,
just
it's great, wasn't
Paul
it?
McGann, it's so brilliant, and of course the trio, the '80s trio of 5, 6, and 7, and it actually really got to me see them because even though they have never been my personal favorite Doctors, and I still grew up with these three, and it really affected me seeing them again.
Obviously, we had classic Doctors in this episode, but we also saw more than I could ever imagined of classic companions in this episode. Like, I'd seen the rumours about classic Doctors appearing, so it was a surprise, but not 100% surprise. But obviously, we knew about Tegan and Ace. But outside of that, seeing, Joe, Mel, Ian Chesterton at the end of the story was one of the most wonderful moments. I think that seeing him in Doctor Who after, he was in it 59 years ago and he's here again. Like, that's just mental, I think. Him having a line of dialogue as well. He wasn't just stuck in the background, as just a nice face. He got to, have an actual line as well, which I thought was just brilliant. And just that concept that I don't know why they've never done it before, really, of the sort of Companions Anonymous, meeting a little support group for former companions is a great idea, I think. It's just fundamentally a really cool idea, a really fun way to bring them all together and incorporate the ones, well, at least the ones who have been left on Earth, I suppose. But yeah, Charlie, was that another highlight, seeing all these classic companions back in Doctor Who again, even if it was just briefly for some of them?
Absolutely, yeah, I think it's great. I mean, obviously, we had Tegan and Ace, and we got Graham as well, who's not a classic companion, but it was still nice to see him, even though his work in the actual episode, the bulk of the episode was kind of pointless, but it was nice to see him. But as soon as I know there was the filming leaks, wasn't there, with the outside area, and we saw Graham there, we saw Yaz, and that was where the Graham speculation started. And as soon as Graham and Dan showed up and said, like, you weren't invited, I sort of got an idea that it would be sort of a gathering of classic companions. And yeah, it was just fantastic. We got, I think it was just 3 extra ones, wasn't it? It was Mel, Joe, and Ian. I know there's been, like, there's been talks of, like, Mel, hasn't there? I know there's been some other slight rumours of that.
For her coming back for the 60th, which I'm now wondering whether it's just because of this that ended up being a rumor, or whether actually she's in the 60th. Who knows? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But
yeah, so I sort of expected Mel, and then we got Joe, and I was like, yeah, you got to have Joe. And then Ian, I was very surprised about that, but I was so happy because, and like you said, he didn't, he wasn't just like a background character. He had a line, he was there, and I think it's really fantastic just to see, like, he was in An Unearthly Child, which I actually watched earlier today because I'm doing a big marathon of all of Doctor Who before the 60th.
Oh wow, good luck doing that in 12 months.
I'll hopefully get through lots of classic Who in holidays. So
that's the way to do it. Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy because I rewatched Power of the Doctor today. So I watched An Unearthly Child with Ian in his 30s, and then Power of the Doctor with Ian in his 90s. It was kind of crazy.
That is crazy.
It's just fantastic to see. I kind of, after seeing Ian, kind of hoped we get to see Carol Ann Ford as well. I can't say I'm disappointed with the whole episode that she wasn't in it, but it would have been cool to see as well.
Yeah, I guess it would have been hard to explain it given she's been left 200 years in the future.
Yeah, true.
That's what was tricky. And whereas initially I was thinking, why are they not there? Why are they not there? But actually, it's because a lot of them have been left in situations where they couldn't be there now.
Like Romana's on Gallifrey, Leela's on Gallifrey.
Exactly. And like even looking like at new series companions, like Donna can't remember the Doctor, sort of. Rose, she's stuck in a parallel universe. Martha probably just wouldn't bother. Amy and Rory are dead or trapped in the past. Clara's off flying around. Like none of the companions can actually just come back, can they?
No, Mickey's Noel Clarke.
Yes, Mickey is Noel Clarke, which is a bit of a problem now. Yeah, Captain Jack is John Barrowman as well. That's also an issue. It's a bit it's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? But Bill, was it a joyous moment to see those classic companions that we did?
Yeah, it was really nice to see them again. I think Ian especially. just like I said earlier, it's just so lovely to have him back. And yeah, like Charlie was saying, just the fact that he was there right from the very beginning, and then to see him in the show nowadays, even for just a few minutes, was just so. It's all about. This is why it feels a bit like an anniversary special, because it's like kind of it's just paying on past. It's in a way I kind of want to say it's almost like it's come full circle in a way. It's like it's gone from, having Ian as a young man flying off with the first Doctor in the 60s to then him getting to chat to some of the other companions in the 2020s. And that's lovely. It wasn't that surprising because, like, Joe is such a iconic and well-beloved companion that if you're going to bring back any classic companion, it would make sense for her to be at least one of them. And then Mel's an interesting one because, like you say, there's stuff about her being potentially in the 60th, which I know is based off Catherine Tate in filming when she's playing Donna, saying, "Oh, what about Mel?" And then David Tennant's 14th Doctor says, "Oh yeah, she's brilliant," or something like that, which is interesting. Like you say, this is why I feel like it's going to be an interesting situation when it comes to just who is coming back for 60th in general, because like you've already had the most classic Doctors, apart from Tom Baker because he didn't want to take part in it, because he wasn't able to. But you've already had most of them come back, and then obviously there's the whole Chris Eccleston stuff, and Peter Capaldi's not that keen on coming back either. So then you're really just left with, for previous Doctors anyway, you're left with Matt Smith and Jodie Whittaker, who has only just left. So then it's weird to think of, well, what exactly are they doing for 60th then? Is it going to have more than one Doctor, or is it just going to be primarily, anyway, David Tennant and Catherine Tate leading with Ncuti in for bits of it maybe? And same for companions. It would be really interesting to see what exactly happens with the 60th in regards to that. I think it's really interesting. I think it will be a very different situation because we've had this episode. I think sort of if Chris had ended his era with, I'm not saying with Legend of the Sea Devils, but with a story that wasn't so celebratory, then maybe Russell would have taken a more almost celebratory approach to celebrating the 60th, because as you say, he's kind of narrowed it down to actually the only other Doctor who could really appear is Matt Smith. To have a substantial role. Yes, maybe we could get the classics in for cameos again, but then they've just done that in this episode. So is it really something you want to repeat in your next episode? So it's sort of, I'm sure there will be surprises. And, Russell sort of intimated that we, just because you've seen a load of location filming doesn't mean you know everything that's happening in these specials. Like, there's loads of stuff we don't know about. And I do kind of feel like Matt Smith will end up turning up. I kind of do think that's going to happen. But actually, that he might be the only other Doctor we see. And it might be much more focused on, maybe some classic monsters. I mean, we've got Beat the Meep, among others, obviously, coming back, which is a bit bonkers from the comics. I just think it's going to be fascinating to see. But I think it's going to be quite a different sort of celebration to what we've had in this episode and to what we've had in Day of the Doctor as well, back in 2013. It's a real different approach. And so, Ryan, we've obviously spoken about the little cameos, but what about Tegan and Ace? Did you feel they were well served in this story? Like, did you think they had, they were well written, had the opportunity, were able to bring the performances again? Just how did you think they kind of hit in this episode?
I thought they were handled very well, and I mean, they meant a lot to me because of the fact that I grew up with them, and they were the best companions of the 80s, and they sort of really elevated the whole 80s for me. And so seeing them again and seeing how changed they are and how mature they've been since their last story just really affected me in a lot of ways, especially when they see their own Doctor again and just seeing Davison with Tegan. And I've said on record that I'm not a huge fan of Peter Davison's Doctor, but yet I actually kind of choked up seeing Davison interact with Tegan again. And then, of course, it really hit me in the feels when Sylvester McCoy and Ace had their moments, which honestly really got to me. And of course, when we do see all those companions at the end, I think having Ian there was the one that really got to me. I mean, he's probably the most significant because the Doctor probably wouldn't have been the person that they are without Ian and Barbara. They were the ones that brought out his compassionate, heroic side. It was thanks to those two, just seeing Ian show up, that makes it all the more significant. And the fact that, in a way, this was sort of an anniversary special in of itself. I think it's going to be a bit weird, the fact that for Russell, the 60th anniversary isn't really doing anything all that celebratory, except for maybe his own stuff back in the late 2000s. And if it's just going to be a completely different story where presumably for 2 of the 3 specials, it's just David, and the last one, it's just Shooty, it's going to be a very different type of anniversary special than what we've got in the past.
Yeah, I do think we're looking to something quite different in 2023, and maybe different to what we had all been expecting for the last few years because of this. And that's not, a bad thing necessarily. I think it's just set Russell a different challenge to maybe what he was initially expecting to have. But I think, we can obviously have a lot of confidence in Russell. I think he's going to pull something great out for the specials. I'm sure he will. And well, we've got many, many months to speculate about it, of course. And obviously, talking of the return of David Tennant and that whole RTD2 situ, we must talk about the regeneration itself. The great moment where the Doctor regenerates outside the TARDIS for the first time since, well, I guess Paul McGann, I suppose. And then Tom Baker in Logopolis would be the other one, I think. If we had any others. And John Pertwee was just outside the TARDIS, wasn't he? So those were our 3 up until now.
Patrick Troughton.
Yeah, okay, yeah, true. But then, well, if you watched, was it called Devious or something? Doesn't he regenerate inside the TARDIS? So, it's a bit debatable. But yeah, so guys, what did you think of the actual regeneration of going from Jodie Whittaker into David Tennant? Charlie, what did you think of it?
Well,
it was a fantastic scene, to be honest. I'm really happy with what we got. I know there was sort of rumors of this, like a very quiet regeneration, sort of, an alone regeneration on top of a cliff, overlooking the sea, and we got that. I think it was fantastic. It looked really nice. The CGI looked cool. The visuals were great. The music was fantastic. We got like a very epic orchestral version of the 13th Doctor's theme by Sagan Akinola, which was great. I feel a great way to end his time in the show as well. And the scene was fantastic. And then as soon as the clothes started changing, which really surprised me, I was like, what's going on here? And then obviously we got David Tennant, which as soon as all the clothes, I sort of knew, we've seen that exact same suit in location footage, haven't we? And I wasn't overly surprised, given that I kind of expected it to be Jodie into David and then no shoot.
I thought they like the fact that you mentioned it was much more of a quiet regeneration, and because given the fact that in the previous 2 generations all day, and just it's like I'm glad that they didn't decide to go in that same direction. It's a much more quieter regeneration for Jodie, and her final line of "Doctor, whoever I'm about to be, tag you're it," I think is brilliant for her Doctor, and then of course I thought that there was a good way to end the final scene with her, and then of course the clothes regeneration, the first time since the first ever regeneration since that had happened, and David now officially the 14th Doctor. He's not a special titled one. He's not in the vein of the fugitive or war doctors. He's officially number 14, and Shooty is 15.
Yeah, that was surprising.
That's a really bold thing, and Russell himself has confirmed this as well. So it's I think this is probably maybe the second time this has happened where an actor has come back and played two different versions of the Doctor. Of course, we had Tom Baker in the 50th anniversary, but I think this is the first time they've actually really properly went for it. And if that's the case, I think the 14th Doctor's going to join the likes of the 8th Doctor as one of the shortest running Doctors we've had in Doctor Who history. So, it does have me wondering if Tennant is going to play the 14th Doctor in the same way as he did the 10th Doctor, if he's actually going to do something different this time around. It's going to be very interesting to see if he's actually going to do something different with the part this time around that maybe he couldn't have done with the 10th Doctor.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to finding that out. And I'm sure it'll open up many new avenues for Big Finish to make the 14th Doctor adventures with David Tennant once again. I'm sure Big Finish are already looking at the money there. But no, it's going to be really, really interesting. And Bill, well, was this what you were expecting from the regeneration? Were you expecting it to be into Tennant, or where did you expect it to go?
Well, given what we'd seen of the filming pictures in, I think it was Bristol, and just the general sort of like vibe I was kind of getting going into this, I thought, it probably is going to be into David Tennant. So it wasn't a surprise when he appeared. I'm glad he's back because 10th Doctor is my favourite Doctor. So to have David Tennant back is really, really cool. And I'm really looking forward to him and Catherine Tate having more adventures in the 60th, because that's another Doctor and companion team that I've always really liked. And I understand like it was different in terms of the clothes changed compared to like recent regenerations anyway. Obviously, the very first one, Patrick Troughton did wake up from the regeneration with most of his outfit already there. But I understand that some people, some perhaps newer fans, weren't quite that keen on it because they thought, well, why are they doing this? Why is it so like, why have they changed the clothes? And I think it comes down to, I think a lot of it was probably the behind the scenes stuff, the production stuff, like how we know that the TARDIS console room itself has been dismantled. So I would be very surprised if we saw anything of, I know they're going to be using Jodie's police box, but I'd be very surprised if they used anything of the interior in the 60th, unless they literally just used a green screen, which I don't know how that's going to look. It's, I feel like that's kind of fine. If it is the production side of things, that's completely fine. If it's just Russell kind of just wanted to show that this regeneration really is very different from the past few that we've had, and that there is, I'm sure there'll definitely be a reason why David Tennant is back as a Doctor. And, it won't just be like, some people may think it's just because, he's the most popular Doctor, but I'm sure there's a real proper explanation that will come in the 60th for it, which I'm sure will make a lot of sense, or hopefully will. And it's just nice to have him back, really. And to just kind of, it just ended the episode really kind of just on this really nice kind of note for me personally. And so it's just, and in the trailer, next time trailer, seeing him with Catherine Tate again. And then we saw a bit of Neil Patrick Harris, who I'm guessing is the Celestial Toy Maker, and Shooty, and I think it's really shaping up to be a really, really exciting new era for Doctor Who, especially with the stuff we found out about Disney Plus and the new or refresh of the old Diamond logo and everything being used now. Just really looking forward to it overall.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm really looking forward to it too, and I think I feel remarkably like happy and okay with where we're at. Like, I remember when it was first rumored in January that David Tennant was going to be the 14th Doctor, I was like, this is a terrible idea, it's never going to work, they shouldn't do it, surely this is a load of nonsense. and now it's actually happened, and I don't hate it. So I'm kind of, I don't know, maybe I've just had enough time to get used to it, but yeah, I'm excited to see what next year's going to bring, and you know what Russell's going to bring to the show, a new era, a new feel to the show again, because you know we've had this same Chibnall era feel to it since, well, for the last 4 years, since Series 11 was airing this time 4 years ago. And just to have that fresh new experience of Doctor Who, I think is something so to look forward to, even if we've got a long wait for it. I think that's going to be really, really great. So overall, guys, would we say that we're kind of at least in the more positive camp towards this episode? Like, generally, it was pretty good. It wasn't, you know, it's, as you said, Charlie, I think at the start, it's not Heaven Sent, it's not the Doctor Falls, it's not the greatest episode of Doctor Who ever. But actually, it was quite fun. It was quite enjoyable. It was full of great fan service that we all love. And so, yeah, you guys think overall a pretty positive experience?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, yeah, it doesn't quite reach the heights of, well, for me, the gold standard regeneration stories are still, you know, the War Games, Case of Androzani, and Capaldi's end trilogy of World Enough and Time, The Doctor Falls, and Twice Upon a Time. For me, those are still like the gold standard of regeneration stories for me. But I think this was still a solid ending in its own right. I wish it ended with a good, consistent, solid run throughout her entire era. I wish she had a much better era than what we got. But I'm happy that at least she ended on at least a solid enough note. And as I said at the beginning, even though I didn't completely love the story or thought it was a masterpiece, in the end, that doesn't really matter. It may be a chaotic mess at times, but at least it was Chibnall's mess. And honestly, I don't think I would have it any other way, to be honest.
Yeah, it felt, I think it really did feel the sort of fitting finale that we hoped, I suppose. It's not perfect, but it kind of is completely fitting with the Chibnall era of Doctor Who. That, you know, it just really sums it up, I think.
Yeah, I feel it's sort of the best case scenario of what we could have got. Like, we could have got a load, like 90 minutes of pure just exposition about Fugitive Doctor, Timeless Child, just a massive PowerPoint presented by Dewan. Like Timeless Child, but 90 minutes, and it's just pure that. That was the worst case, but this is sort of the best we could have got. Like, no one was really expecting anything masterful. Well, you know,
great joke,
but not intended. But yeah, I think it was a solid entry into Doctor Who. I give it like an 8 out of 10, I'd say.
Yeah, it's that kind of level, I think, isn't it? Yeah. And Bill, would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I mean, like I said at the beginning, I have my issues with it, and you know, there's issues being Dan's exit. I wish he'd been in it more, but I also understand his reason for leaving.
Yes.
And I feel like it was handled as well as it could be, given that he was only in it for a few minutes.
Yes,
really.
I agree.
So that's fine. The whole Timeless Child thing not being resolved, it is a shame. I kind of get that, like Charlie was saying, ultimately it's better that it was the episode that we got rather than a PowerPoint presentation all about the Timeless Child and all of that, because nobody would want that at all. So I think it just shows how the Timeless Child is one of those ideas for Doctor Who, which, like the Cartmel master plan, when they were plotting that in the late 1980s, I think Andrew Cartmel and Ben Aronovich have both said how they were always trying to be careful not to go too far with it, not to kind of like overtly say, right, the Doctor is the other and the Doctor is this and that, is like a god. Because they then knew that they would then be back to square one with the exact problem they were trying to, rectify. And I think that kind of shows with the Timeless Child and why perhaps Chibnall didn't go further with it. And then I suppose it might be a similar thing with the Fugitive Doctor. I wish we'd have gotten more of Jo Martin.
Yeah.
I love the fact that she's getting her own Big Finish series, but I'd also love it if she could get her own spin-off at some point, because I think she definitely deserves that. But even though she was only in it for a few minutes as a hologram, at least she was still in it. And, she was still acted so amazingly in those few minutes. And yeah, I think that's about, to be honest, if it's just them kind of issues of not properly resolving some stuff, I think that's kind of worked probably quite well for the episode overall, because at least Chibnall didn't try and just to completely tackle these things on and then it be even more of a mess than we got. So these things could have been resolved a lot better, a lot more satisfactorily, but at least we've kind of got them resolved a bit back in flux.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where we're at, because Chibnall decided he's not going to try and resolve everything in 90 minutes. We got a much better episode for it. We got a better ending for the era for it. Even if when we go back and watch it all again, we'll be left with a few open questions and open ends that will never be resolved. And I guess to an extent, that's the nature of the loss of Doctor Who. It's full of plot holes. It's full of open threads that, writers and showrunners created and thought were a great idea and then didn't really know how to end them, so just kind of left them. And I think that these will kind of be parts of that as well. But yeah, overall, I think it was a great story. It was a lot of fun, and we're set for a really exciting new era to come in 2023. After the year-long wait. That's going to be really exciting. Of course, today, as we record today, we got the new logo, as you mentioned, Bill, the new diamond style, a proper throwback to the 1970s, 1980s. Well, yeah, 1970s essentially of Doctor Who. I don't know. The main question is, do we think this is just for the 60th, or is it the new logo for the whole of RTD2?
I think it's the new logo for the whole of RTD2. I'm willing to put a bet on that. Okay. And honestly, I'm someone who absolutely adores the Tom Baker era and actually thinks it's so brilliant. Well, at least the first three, the Hinchcliffe Holmes era especially, and growing up with that, just seeing that being a modernised version of that logo, just what more can you ask for? It's good. Yeah, it just looks amazing. I'm glad that's the new logo, and I hope it doesn't affect the Blu-ray collection range.
Yes, please don't.
We want consistency with that, at least. And also, a little bit of an interesting thing is that then we might have the new composer. I think we might have some confirmation of hints of who that could be.
Where'd you get that from?
Twitter. Blair Mauer, who was the composer of Class, he actually retweeted this and said, well, here we go again. It's got some people thinking, like, could he be like the new composer of...
it would be interesting, yeah.
I honestly don't see Murray Gold coming back to...
I kind of do. I think he's going to come, at least for the 60th specials, I think he's coming back. I don't really want him to, because I've had enough of him, but I think he will. It was notable, I thought, on the Shooty Gatwal video they had today, they used the Series 4 theme underneath it, the one that was shared on social media. They used the Series 4 Doctor Who theme, which, I don't know, I thought, you'd probably use the most recent one if, you were just throwing in whatever, but they decided specifically to go back to the Dave Tennant era one of Murray Gold's to use under that. I thought that was just a little interesting extra bit there. But yeah, I think, a new logo is always exciting. It starts a fresh new era for the show. Russell's certainly not, holding back. He's getting on with it. He's changing things. He's announced this massive Disney Plus deal today where Doctor's going to be shown anywhere that's not the UK. Basically, you'll be able to watch it on Disney Plus, which is so good for marketing promotion. It's so much easier to promote the show than saying, oh, in this country it's on this channel, in this country it's on that, blah, blah, blah. You can just say, if you're not in the UK, it's on Disney Plus, go and watch it. And it's just going to be so cool. As much as we obviously in the UK can't get it, it's going to be so great for Doctor Who to be sitting alongside Marvel and Star Wars on Disney Plus. Like, to have it up there in that, the same sections in that sort of a platform, I think is just massive for the show. And maybe could be potential for spin-offs in the future on Disney Plus or something. I don't know. It's just a thought with a bit of funding from them, or even for us, whether they could fund some animations in the future. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
Because of course we can now work out that BBC America obviously are not showing Doctor Who anymore, so that's clearly why they pulled out of doing funding for the animations, because they're not going to be involved with the show anymore. So that'll make sense. But now, Disney, it's your turn. Come and finance some amazing classic Doctor Who animations, please.
Please, we need some more. I mean, they can't just leave it
for
so many and then just End it there. We need more of that.
And well, after the Dalek Master Plan reference in the episode, we need Dalek Master Plan animated.
Yes.
That's the sign.
Yeah, even if it
Exactly.
takes them until like 2026, I
Who cares?
really
Just do
want
it. Yes.
like Mission to the Unknown and Dalek's Master Plan in one like
Please.
3-disc set would be
Yeah. That's
fantastic.
it. That's all I want. Even if they don't do any more, just do that one. We all just want that one. And well, I think that's a great note to end on. We're running out of time, so we're going to leave it there for today. But I hope you've enjoyed our discussion all about Power of the Doctor and all things around it. I'm sorry we couldn't cover off absolutely everything, but it was an episode kind of just too packed full of stuff to talk about everything. But we will be back again soon, of course. We'll be back to our normal programming, I suppose, of talking about DVDs and Blu-rays. We will soon, I hope, have the Season 2 Blu-ray to discuss. We obviously haven't properly discussed it on the podcast, and when we get an official release date, then we will do a podcast discussing all the, the special features because they've got the official list breakdown. The rumour is it's going to be the 14th of November, but I'll believe it when I see it. And also the rumour, I'm not sure if it's been confirmed or it's just a rumour, is that the Series 13 specials, so this year's specials release, I think is the 7th of November is the number I've seen. So also quite soon. So it might be that in the next month we get 2 new releases, which is pretty cool. But, well, we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. And well, if they do, we will certainly be talking about them here on KerVAM. But as always, do check us out on Twitter at KerVAMPod. You can check us out on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and on my YouTube channel, EMS Productions. So wherever you're not listening or watching, you can go to any of those and enjoy the podcast. But from me, from Charlie, from Bill, from Ryan, it is goodbye for now.